I didn't realize someone could be living inside the place you work without anyone noticing, until I accidentally locked him in with me. This happened 3 years ago, when I was 22 and working as the closing manager at a small grocery store in Eastern Washington. It wasn't some giant chain, just one of those regional stores that sits off a highway exit, surrounded by a gas station, a shuttered diner, and a whole lot of nothing. We closed at midnight, and most nights were boring in the best way. For context, there were usually 3 of us on the late shift: me, another cashier, and a stocker. By 11:30, the stocker would usually dip into the back to finish paperwork. The other cashier would start counting their drawer, and I'd walk the aisles, straightening things up and gently herding any lingering customers toward the front. It became such a routine that I could do it half asleep. That night was in late November, just cold enough that we barely saw anyone after 10 p.m. Around 11:15, a guy wandered in that I'd never seen before. Mid-30s, I'd guess. Tall, wearing a gray hoodie with the drawstrings pulled tight, and a baseball cap low over his face. What stood out wasn't his appearance, though. It was that he never took a basket, never picked anything up, and never really seemed to be looking at the shelves. He was looking up, at the corners, the cameras, the fixtures that I remember thinking maybe he was a contractor or something, looking at the lighting, but he didn't have that confident, inner vibe those guys usually have. He drifted like he had nowhere else to be, hands in his pockets, staring just a little too long at every camera dome he passed. I asked him once if he needed help finding anything. He barely turned his head, just said, "I'm good," in this flat, toneless voice, then kept walking. I told myself he was just weird, not dangerous. That was my first mistake. By 11:45, he was the only customer left. I did my usual last call over the intercom, that fake, cheerful voice I used to put on. "Attention shoppers, we'll be closing in 15 minutes. Please bring your final selections to the front registers." He didn't react at all. He was standing at the end of aisle 9, staring up at the ceiling like he was counting the tiles. The other cashier, Danny, leaned over and whispered, "What's with hoodie guy? He been in here a while." I told her I'd handle it and walked over toward him, trying to look casual. As soon as he saw me coming, he finally reached out and grabbed something off the shelf. A random can of soup. He turned it over like he was reading the label, even though his eyes never moved. "We're closing in a few minutes," I said. "Just so you know." He gave the tiniest nod without looking at me and said, "Yeah, I'm almost done." His voice was calm, but there was a weird tremor in it, like he was excited or nervous. He eventually came up to the front with that single can of soup. Paid in cash, exact change. He didn't say thank you, didn't say good night, just walked out, head down. I watched him leave through the automatic doors, watched him step into the dark parking lot. His car wasn't parked near the entrance, which I thought was odd. It was way off toward the side, almost at the edge of the lot where the light didn't fully reach. After that, we did our usual closing routine. Locked the front doors, turned off the music, killed half the lights. Danny signed out and left around 12:10. The stalker, Ramon, poked his head out from the back and yelled that he was done and going home. I did a quick walkthrough of the aisles with my flashlight, more out of habit than concern. The store was silent except for the humming of the refrigerators. Everything was normal until I got to aisle 9. There was a ladder pulled slightly away from the wall, the kind maintenance used when they needed to reach the ceiling panels. We didn't leave those out on the floor. They were kept in the back. I stared at it for a second, trying to remember if anyone had been fixing something earlier and left it there. Nothing came to mind that I should have walked away right then, called Ramon, or even called the non-emergency line. Instead, I muttered to myself about lazy coworkers and decided I'd just push it to the side and deal with it in the morning. When I put my hand on the ladder to move it, I noticed one of the ceiling tiles directly above it wasn't sitting quite right. It was pushed up a little in one corner, leaving a thin, dark gap. It was one of those details your brain flags even when you don't want it to. I felt this little electric jolt of unease run through me. I moved the ladder back under the tile and climbed up 2 steps just to get a better look. The gap was maybe an inch wide, just enough to see that the space above the tiles was dark and cluttered with wires and ductwork. I shone my flashlight up and immediately wished I hadn't. For a half second, I could have sworn I saw an eye staring back at me. Not the whole face, just one eye pressed close to the gap, catching the beam of my light and flinching away. The tile shifted with a faint scraping sound. I froze. My first instinct was to tell myself I hadn't seen what I thought I saw. Maybe it was a reflection from the flashlight or some piece of metal up there. But the more I replayed that moment in my head, the less it felt like a trick of the light, and the more it felt like I had just locked eyes with someone hiding in the ceiling of my store that I stepped down from the ladder so fast I nearly missed the last rung. The rational part of my brain was scrambling to come up with any explanation that didn't involve another human being up there. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe I just scared myself. But my body wasn't buying it. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding in my ears so loud that the quiet hum of the store suddenly felt deafening. I took a few steps back and just stared up at that crooked tile. Nothing moved. No sound. The beam from my flashlight looked suddenly very small, like it barely reached the ceiling even though I knew that was in my head. I told myself I'd go get the pole we used to adjust the tiles and push it back into place. Seal whatever was up there away, whether it was real or just my imagination. That's when the tile shifted again. This time it wasn't a subtle scrape. It lifted a fraction of an inch, then settled back with a soft thud, like someone had just moved their weight. I didn't see an eye, but I didn't need to. That tiny, unnatural movement was all it took to convince me. There was someone in the ceiling. Suddenly the fact that I had locked the front doors felt a lot less comforting. I backed away, keeping my flashlight trained on that gap until I reached the end of the aisle. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I ran. Not a full-on sprint, but a fast, clumsy speed walk that probably looked ridiculous if anyone had been there to see it. I ducked into the manager's office near the front, shut the door, and locked it. That little metal click felt useless against someone determined, but I did it anyway. Then I grabbed the landline and dialed 911 with fingers that didn't feel like they belonged to me. The dispatcher picked up and did the standard greeting, but I cut her off and blurted out that I thought there was someone inside the store. I told her about the guy in the hoodie, the ladder, the tile, the eye. It all came out in this shaky, disjointed jumble. She had me slowed down and confirm the address, asked if I was alone, if there were any weapons, if I could safely exit the building. Not without walking back past where he is, I said. He's above aisle 9. I locked the front doors already. I don't know if he can get down from somewhere else. She told me to stay in the office with the door locked, keep the line open, and stay as quiet as possible. Officers were on the way. I remember sitting down on the rolling chair as quietly as I could, like even the squeak of the wheels might draw attention. There was a bank of security monitors on the wall above the desk. Most of them showed empty aisles, frozen snapshots of shelves and checkouts, and glowing freezer doors. One showed the back hallway near the stockroom. One showed the entrance, with the locked doors and the empty parking lot beyond. And one camera, grainy and slightly off-center, showed the top of aisle 9. I switched to that feed and turned the volume down on the dispatcher so I could listen for anything outside the office. For a long, terrible minute, nothing happened. Just the static Y image of the aisle, the top of the shelves, and the white squares of the drop ceiling above them. Then, slowly, one of those squares moved. The camera didn't catch the exact spot where I'd been standing earlier. It was aimed a little down the aisle from there. But I saw, clear as day, a tile near the center of the frame being pushed up from below. A hand emerged first, pale, thin fingers gripping the metal support rail. Then another hand. Then a head, hood up, face angled away from the camera. He eased himself out of the ceiling like he'd done it 100 times before, letting his legs dangle before dropping lightly onto the top shelf. He crouched there for a second, just a dark shape against the pale tiles, then stepped down onto the floor between the shelves. The dispatcher whispered something, asking if I was still there. I realized I'd stopped breathing. I forced myself to answer, keeping my voice low, telling her he was on the floor now. She asked if he knew where I was. I had no idea. I hadn't exactly been subtle running away, but I also doubted he'd heard every detail over the hum of the store on the screen. He moved with this weird, deliberate slowness. Not like a panicked intruder who'd been caught, but like someone who knew the layout better than he should. He walked to the end of aisle 9, paused, then turned not toward the front, but toward the back hallway, slipping out of the camera's view. That was somehow worse than if he'd come toward the entrance, toward where I was, at least I'd know. Instead, he vanished into the blind spots, the storage area, the employee-only corridors, the freezer access. All the places cameras didn't fully cover. Somewhere in the distance, faint through the walls, I heard a short burst of sirens. The dispatcher confirmed officers were arriving and told me not to open the office door for anyone unless they identified themselves by name and badge number. I nodded like she could see me, eyes glued to the monitor in case he reappeared. Those next few minutes felt longer than the entire rest of the shift. Eventually, there was a loud pounding at the front entrance and a muffled voice announcing it was the police. I watched on the monitor as 2 uniforms appeared at the door. I told the dispatcher I could see them, and she relayed back that they were going to have me open the entrance remotely. There was a switch on the wall for the automatic locks. I didn't want to get up to hit it, but I forced myself to stand, unlock the office door, and shuffle into the front area. The store felt different now, bigger and emptier and wrong. I hit the switch, heard the locks disengage, and watched the officers push the doors open with their flashlights already up. They didn't waste time. One stayed near the front with me, asking me to point out aisle 9, the office, the exits. The other disappeared down the aisles, calling out clear, checking corners, methodically sweeping the store. A third officer came in through the back door a minute later, having circled around. They checked everywhere. The aisles, the stockroom, the loading dock, the employee bathroom. Each report came back the same. Nothing. Nobody. The space above the ceiling, though, told a different story. When they finally pulled down one of the tiles above aisle 9 and shone a flashlight inside, you could see the path someone had made through the dust. Footprints on the joists. A flattened area where insulation was pushed aside. A rolled-up sleeping bag wedged between ductwork. A small stash of grocery items. Empty water bottles, protein bars, even one of our store-brand blankets from Seasonal. He hadn't just been hiding there for an hour, he'd been living there. Later, when the initial adrenaline wore off, we checked older camera footage. Buried in days of recordings was the guy in the gray hoodie, appearing at random hours over the course of a week. Sometimes he'd walk in, disappear down an aisle, and never come back out on any camera. We realized that first time I saw him leave, I'd assumed the dark shape walking away from the doors was his car. It wasn't. He hadn't left at all. The police never found him. They figured the sound of the sirens and the announcement over the radio probably gave him enough warning to slip out through some fire exit we rarely used, maybe even dropping down into the stockroom while everyone was focused on the front. Corporate had a team in the next day sealing up the ceiling access points and installing more cameras, but that didn't change the fact that for at least a week, possibly longer, a stranger had been sleeping above us every night while we worked TO this day. Whenever I'm in a store late at night and I see those ceiling tiles, I can't help but wonder who might be watching from the wrong side of them. I used to think calling a rideshare was the safe option. You tap a button, a driver shows up, your trip is tracked. It felt a lot better than walking home alone. Until the night the app told me I'd already been dropped off while I was still locked in the car. This was last year, my junior year of college. I go to school in a mid-sized city that thinks it's much safer than it really is. We have the usual bar strip just off campus where everyone ends up on Friday nights. The kind of place where the pavement is sticky and the same bad pop songs play on loop. That night, I stayed later than usual. My friends had all peeled off one by one to go home or hit some after-party, and I ended up chatting with a couple of people I barely knew until last call. By the time I stepped outside, it was close to 2 in the morning. The air had that damp, late-night chill, and the streetlights made everything look a little more washed out than it did going in. Walking back to my apartment would have taken maybe 20 minutes. Normally, I didn't mind, especially if I had someone with me. But that night my feet hurt, my head was buzzing, and the idea of trudging home alone through a mostly empty neighborhood just didn't appeal. So I pulled out my phone and opened the app. Like always, the app popped up a name, rating, and car. Victor, for 0.9 stars, Silver Camry. The profile picture was a grainy shot of a guy in sunglasses behind the wheel. Nothing special, nothing alarming. ETA, 2 minutes. I stepped away from the crowd bottlenecked at the bar doors and waited under a streetlight, hugging my jacket around myself. When the Camry pulled up, the plate and model matched. The driver leaned over, popped the lock, and I slid into the back seat with the kind of automatic trust you don't realize you've given until it's too late. "Hey," I said, pulling the door shut. He didn't answer. He glanced at me in the rear view for half a second, eyes expressionless, then looked away and pulled into traffic. Up close, he looked younger than in the picture, early 30s, maybe, with a neutral face that somehow still felt blank. That we drove in silence for a minute. I pulled out my phone to text my roommate a quick on my way, but when I glanced at the app, my brain stalled. The trip status didn't say en route. It said completed. Drop off, my address. Time, 1 minute ago. I blinked, thinking it was a glitch. I closed the app, reopened it. Same thing. According to the system, I was already home. Even though we were still at least a mile away, heading through side streets I didn't recognize. A cold, clear wave of sobriety crashed through whatever buzz I had left. Hey, I said, leaning forward a bit, trying to keep my tone light. The app glitched. It says you already dropped me off. He didn't respond right away. His hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the wheel. Yeah, he said finally. That happens sometimes. The way he said it sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced that exact sentence in a mirror. I swallowed. Can you end it and restart? I asked. I don't like that it thinks I'm already home. This time, when he met my eyes in the mirror, he didn't look away. You are home, he said. You're with me. Then he reached over and turned the radio up just a little. Enough so that normal conversation would have to fight to be heard. I looked at the door. The lock nub was down. No manual slider, just a smooth handle and the tiny black stud of the child lock. I tapped it with my finger. It didn't move. My heart started beating so loud it felt like it was in my throat. That I did 3 things almost at once. I took a screenshot of the trip completed screen. I shared my live location with my roommate. And I hit the in-app emergency button with my thumb. A woman from the company answered in under 10 seconds. Her voice was calm, practiced, almost too soothing. Hi, this is rideshare safety support. I see you're on a trip. Are you safe right now? I stared at the back of his head, at his shoulders hunched just slightly too far forward. Yeah, I said, as evenly as I could, like I was talking to a friend. I'm in my ride, but the app says I've already been dropped off at home. That's not right. There was a small pause. I heard typing. Okay, she said softly. I see that. Can you confirm your driver's name and license plate out loud? I did. Victor. Plate. Silver Camry. As I talked, his eyes flicked up to the mirror again, watching my mouth move, like he was trying to decide if I was talking about him. Thank you, the woman said. Stay on the line. Do not leave the vehicle unless you can do so safely. Law enforcement is being contacted. Can you describe your surroundings? We were cutting across a darker residential stretch now, fewer streetlights, houses set back from the road. Still driving, I said. Near Hawthorne, I think. Heading south. He turned suddenly, sharper than he needed to, onto a narrower side street. I felt the car's momentum shove me slightly to the side. My phone buzzed. A text from my roommate. Calling 911 now. Stay on. Okay, the support agent said. I could hear the change in her voice. This wasn't just script anymore. Officers have your GPS location. They're close. Can you see any intersections or landmarks? A stop sign loomed ahead. Beyond it, a cross street with a convenience store glowing like an oasis. There's a corner mart on my right, I said, louder this time, like I wanted him to hear it too. He slowed at the stop sign, hesitating just a second too long. Red and blue lights flickered faintly at the far end of the block, getting brighter fast. He saw them before I did. Without warning, he slammed the car into park, leaned over, and hit something on his console. The doors clicked. He twisted halfway around, his face suddenly not blank at all. Get out, he snapped. Now. I didn't argue. I yanked the handle. This time, the door flew open. I stumbled out onto the curb, nearly dropping my phone. The car peeled away, darting down a side alley just as the squad car turned onto the street behind us. The officers didn't catch him that night. But the safety team had his info, the route, the timestamp where he'd manually ended the ride the second I got in. His account was permanently deactivated. According to the email I got a week later, the company apologized and gave me ride credits I'll never use. The app still has that completed trip logged in my history. Home, 1:58 a.m. The time I was sitting in the back seat of a locked car with someone who thought home meant wherever he decided to take me. The last story is shorter, but it's the one that still gives me the most trouble sleeping because it didn't happen in a dark alley or an abandoned building or a stranger's car. It happened in a perfectly normal house, on a perfectly quiet street. While I was doing someone a favor, I was house-sitting for a family friend, watching their dog for a long weekend while they went to a wedding out of state. It was one of those calm, suburban neighborhoods where all the mailboxes match and everyone waves even if they don't know you. The first night, around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not loud, 3 polite taps. The dog didn't bark. I checked the peephole and saw an older man in a flannel shirt, holding a casserole dish covered in foil. When he saw the peephole darken, he smiled, the kind of practiced, neighborly smile you're supposed to trust. "Evening," he called. "I'm Jim next door. Just wanted to drop something off for the Millers before it gets cold." I cracked the door with the chain on and explained they weren't home, that I was just watching the house. His smile twitched for half a second, then came back. "Oh, sure," he said. "Well, you can have it then. Welcome to the neighborhood, I guess." He insisted I take the casserole. Made small talk. Asked my name, where I lived, how long I'd be staying. Normal questions, but a little too many of them. I chalked it up to friendly nosiness. I said goodnight, locked the door, and stuck the casserole in the fridge. I never ate it. The second night, it was almost midnight when I heard the back doorknob rattle. Not a knock. A deliberate, testing turn. The dog, who'd been dead asleep at my feet, went rigid and started this low growl I'd never heard from him before. I grabbed my phone and crept into the kitchen. The porch light was off, but there was enough glow from the stove clock to see the silhouette through the glass. A man standing just out of clear view, one hand on the knob. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then the softest reply, barely audible through the door. "It's Jim. Just checking everything's okay in there." Everything in me screamed that this was wrong. Nobody checks on someone by trying the back door at midnight. I backed away, called 911, and then called the homeowners. While I was still on the phone with dispatch, there was a sudden series of soft metallic clicks at the front door, like someone trying keys that almost fit. The Millers confirmed it. Years ago, before they changed the locks, they'd given a spare key to Jim while they were on vacation. Somewhere along the line, he'd copied it. The police found him still in his yard 15 minutes later, hands empty, eyes bleary. He told them he thought he saw someone inside who didn't belong. Technically, he wasn't wrong. I didn't live there, but he shouldn't have had those keys. They were taken from him quietly, no charges filed, everyone wanting to avoid making it a thing. I finished the weekend with every deadbolt locked, a chair under each handle, and the dog sleeping on the bed with me. I still don't know what would have happened if I'd ignored that first polite knock and let neighborly Jim all the way inside.